Hello lovely people, I'm Debs. Welcome back to my channel, Raina Reads Stuff. I'm here in the book shack. I'm quite late today, but it is still Sunday. I am going to do my weekly reading wrap up. But first, I have no new grandchildren so far. I'm going to show you some bookmarks that I made. I'm taking part in mainly in three events. Victober, Historathon Q4, and Occult Detective October. So I decided I would make myself this week a bookmark for each. I like postcard size bookmarks. So here's my Victober one. Charles Dickens. This fresh-faced lady here is actually advertising cocaine, which I thought was hilarious. And this beautiful young black woman was a ward of Queen Victoria. My Historathon one, we have an old dress pattern, Vickers Flying School, our boys in Vietnam, some kids with gas masks, and the lovely smiling face of Hitler. And this one I really like. This is my Occult Detective one. I'm really pleased with that. Anyway, enough of that rubbish. This week's reading has been inspired by BookTubers, mainly. Quite a lot of it. 2 Gregs and an Alan. I shall explain. I've done quite well this week. I have completed 4 books from start to finish, which isn't too bad, and also some short stories. So the first book I completed, I actually did a video earlier in the week, was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. A first for me. I'd never read any Charlotte Bronte before. I've read Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte and Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, but I thought Jane Eyre was a huge gap in my reading, and therefore it merited its place as the 60th book for my 60 Before 60 Classics challenge. My celebratory video had me waving my arms about and attempting to demolish the book shack, but I was very pleased. And also, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I can't wait to read some more Jane Eyre. Now, if you want to know what my new challenge is, you're going to have to watch the video. I'll link it below. So, from there, like I say, my reading has been influenced by 2 Gregs and an Alan, whom you probably all know. Firstly, Greg from Ghost Readers in the Sky. He did a great video the other day going through all his Robert Louis Stevenson books, and I found this. This is Poems by Robert Louis Stevenson. Underwoods, ballads, songs of travel, that says. This is a rather beaten up book from 1923. I say rather beaten up. It's not that beaten up. It's a bit dog-eared around the edges. And what intrigued me about this was that there's a name inscribed in it, and it says Marie M. Stevenson. So I'm thinking, ooh, maybe a relative. And I went off on a wild goose chase trying to discover whether Robert Louis Stevenson had any offspring or descendants called Marie. He doesn't. It's just a coincidence. I really enjoyed these though. It's in several sections. So we have Underwoods, and it says book 1 in English. I think that was possibly one of my favourite sections. I struggled with book 2. Book 2 was in Scots. I think this is still Underwoods, but it's not in English. Now, for those of you who think that people in England and people in Scotland speak the same language, we do. However, when it's written in dialect, it becomes quite difficult to understand. Embro High Kirk. Now, I know Kirk is church. Weighs me for the poor callant than I, he wambles like a poker bran. I've got no idea what these mean. Now, some of them I quite enjoyed because they were, if you said them out loud, they were quite lyrical. And I suppose I enjoyed them in the same way as I enjoyed Finnegan's Wake, which I understood not at all, but really enjoyed. Other things that stood out for me, the Song of Rehero, A Legend of Tahiti. And this is an old legend that he's put into poetry. It's quite long. It's in 3 parts, and it runs to about 40 pages. But it was really interesting. It was interesting. I don't know any legends from Tahiti. But yes, thoroughly enjoyed this. What I really want to do now, and I don't know whether I've actually got any, I might have some on the e-reader, is have a look at Stevenson's travel writing. I also didn't know that he died so young. He died in his mid-40s of tuberculosis. Right. Number 2, Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads, did a great video earlier this week encouraging people to read more short stories. And I thought, why not? So I started combining that with Occult Detective October, and I picked up this, I think, for the princely sum of 79p. 20 classic stories by E. Hoffman Price of Pierre d'Artois, Occult Detective. So far, I've only read the first 2, which were great fun. The first one was called The Word of Santiago and involved Pierre d'Artois and a character called Santiago arranging a duel in somewhere in France where dueling was banned. And it ended up with Pierre d'Artois fighting death. That was quite good. The second one, The Peacock's Shadow, was more, it was longer and it was more fun, I think, and involved the theft of a mummy. There are another 18 in this book. which I'm looking forward to reading. And this week's prompt for Occult Detective October was pre-1960. Then I thought, I'm going to take Greg's advice. I'm going to read some more short stories. And so I searched in a bag that's over in the corner of things that I have raided from my father's library and came up with 2 volumes of great British short stories. I've read the first 3 of these. 2 of them by authors that I'd heard of, and 1 by an author I've not heard anybody mention. I've never heard of this guy. So the first one was Marjorie Allingham, and the story was called Evidence in Camera, and it was about a series of murders along coastal towns in the west of England, all involving middle-aged women with red hair who weren't robbed, but a trophy of some description was taken. The third one was by Enid Bagnold. It was a very short story. It was only 4 pages, and it was called The Amorous Ghost. And it's about a guy whose wife has been away and is due to return home, but he has this problem of this ghost in his bedroom. The third one, which was actually the second one I read, was by an author called Stacey Ormonier. And it was, what does it say about Stacey Ormonier? Stacey is a man. He was born in 1887. He died in 1928. He was the son of a sculptor, and he was brought up to be a painter, but ended up writing some novels and gently humorous short stories, it says. Now, this is called Miss Bracegirdle Does Her Duty. Miss Bracegirdle is in her 40s. She is the unmarried sister of a dean, and she's never travelled outside England before, but she is dispatched to Bordeaux to collect her sister-in-law, who is returning from South America. She's never travelled on her own, and she has basic French. But she's determined to go. The dean can't go because he's far too busy, so it's got to be her. And she makes her way from the village that she lives in to London, and then to Dover, and then crosses the Channel to Calais, goes to Paris by train, and then down to Bordeaux. She arrives at a hotel in Bordeaux at about midnight. Someone has waited up for her and runs her a bath in a separate bathroom that is down the hall. And she gets ready, big dressing gown, nightdress, her wash things, etc., etc., heads down to the bathroom, has a lovely, luxurious bath, gets ready to go back to her room, gets the wrong door, doesn't realise, goes into this hotel room, shuts the door behind her, and the handle comes off in her hand. So she turns the light on to try and get the handle back on, turns round, and there's a man in the bed. And around this man, on, in the wardrobes and things like that, are this man's things. At this point, she realises she's got the wrong room. she can't get the handle back on the door. So she decides that the only thing to do is to hide under the bed. This story was really good and funny. I will certainly be searching out some more of Stacey or Monnier's work because, like I say, I've never heard of him. Apparently he wrote novels and plays and a lot of short stories. He was only 41 when he died. If anyone's ever heard of him, let me know, because I really want to read some more. Now, this book also includes Nigel Bolchin, H.E. Bates, Hilaire Belloc, Arnold Bennett, Anthony Barclay, Algernon Blackwood, Elizabeth Bowen, G.K. Chesterton, Wilkie Collins, Joseph Conrad, Roald Dahl, Len Deighton, Walter de la Mare, Charles Dickens, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Margaret Drabble, Daphne du Maurier, Rumour Godden, Graham Greene, Neil M. Gunn, L.P. Hartley, W.F. Harvey, Susan Hill, and A.E. Coppart. And this is volume 1. I have volume 2 sitting over there. So I'm going to start reading some more short stories, exactly as Greg suggested. Back to Occult Detective October. Ben Aaronovitch lies sleeping. This was top of my list for Occult Detective books. It didn't disappoint. I will say that of all the ones I've read, and I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the 8th one I've read. I think for this one, you need to have read the first book, because a character called Leslie, who was Peter Grant, our hero, Peter Grant's partner in the first book, reappears in this one with no explanation. And you need the explanation as to why she is no longer Peter's partner and why, in fact, she has joined the other side. But this includes, I mean, these books were a riot. They're great fun. They're fast-paced. They're great fun. Peter Grant is a detective constable in the unit of the Metropolitan Police that deals with the supernatural. His girlfriend is a River of London. His niece is also showing magical powers. It has a really diverse set of characters. Peter himself is black. His current partner is Asian and gay, and she is married to someone outside the Met, but who knows all about her work. This book includes the annual shindig from Father Thames, the kidnapping of one of the rivers of London, Mr. Punch, who turns out actually to be a Saxon prince, the Faceless Man, missing Viking ghosts. They've just disappeared off the face of the earth. And it's just a riot. These are such fun, these books. I've still got another few to go. I think he might be up to book 11 now. I haven't got 9 or 10. I have got another novella of his that I want to read. Finally, my first book for Historathon, The Walls Have Ears. Alan from Alan's Reads sent me this months ago, and I've been saving it for the fourth quarter of Historathon. It was brilliant. Everybody knows now about the code breakers at Bletchley Park during the Second World War, and Alan Turing and his team trying to crack the Enigma code. These guys, led by a man called Thomas Kendrick, who I'd never heard of, and I don't imagine too many people have heard of him. He ran one of the most successful intelligence operations ever. And it involved questioning prisoners of war, but keeping them in conditions that almost lulled them into a false sense of security and bugging everything in sight. They bugged light fittings, they bugged underneath skirting boards, they bugged the trees in the park outside. The operation started off small, and it started at the Tower of London. Prisoners of war who were deemed possibly to have useful information were incarcerated. They were treated well. They were interviewed in a very specific way that almost made them think that their British interrogators were a little bit dense and didn't know how to do their job properly. Then they were sent back to their rooms, and they shared rooms or associated with other prisoners. Absolutely everywhere was bugged. They didn't find the bugs. There were only a couple of occasions where people suspected that the rooms might be bugged, did a thorough search, didn't find anything. There's an occasion that's mentioned in here where 2 German officers have decided that there's a possibility the room might be bugged. They search everywhere, can't find any bugs, but just to be on the safe side, they stick their heads out of the window and whisper to each other outside the room. It's fine. But they've bugged underneath the windowsill, so they can still hear every word they say. This is so clever. And I didn't know anything about it. This book actually came out in 2020. It's by Helen Fry, by the way. Thomas Kendrick was a fluent German speaker. He had previously been in the army. He'd lived in Germany for a while. He came back to Britain. He was a colonel. And he came up with this idea. Like I say, first of all, they used the Tower of London. Then they found a place called Trent Park in Cockfosters in North London. Eventually, they expanded even further and had a couple of houses in Buckinghamshire, which they had commandeered from the people who'd owned them. First of all, they went in and bugged everything. Then they recruited listeners. And to start with, those listeners were fluent German speakers. Eventually, when it became apparent that they weren't getting some words and things and dialects and things, they had to employ native German speakers. And so they employed people who'd escaped the Nazis and come to Britain. Lots lots of native German speakers. They had an entire team of people who were transcribing the messages, and they softened up these officers. It was also a joint operation, so Army, Navy, and Air Force. And when the Americans joined the war, they also shared information with them. They also shared information with Bletchley Park. If these officers were discussing codes or how Enigma machines were working, they got information surreptitiously about all sorts of things. But one of the most poignant things for me in this book was the early mention, and you're talking 1941, of what the Nazis were doing to the Jewish population. And there's an entire chapter on the death camps and the extermination policies of the Germans, of the Nazis, I should say. That's just really harrowing, but vitally important that people know. And until quite recently, nobody knew about these operations. This book, if you have any interest at all in Second World War history, this book is absolutely fascinating. They also employed a rake load of female servicewomen as typists and people who were collating reports. They had a system of referencing. Information was sent to the highest echelons of the intelligence services and the war cabinet, but they helped uncover new construction sites for U-boats, wireless operations, newly developing bombs. The amount of information that they got from these people without them realizing they were extracting information is quite incredible. And they ran these operations for, well, to the end of the war and beyond. What I was quite surprised about is none of the information that they had extracted was used for the Nuremberg trials. And that was because MI6 and MI9 didn't want to admit the operation had taken place at all. It was all so highly classified. And if these things had been used in evidence, the transcripts and the tapes of the conversations that these prisoners of war had in Trent Park and the other houses, the whole operation would have been uncovered, and more information than they wanted to release would have been made public, and they didn't want that. So none of the evidence, although the evidence that they gathered was used for very strategic operations during the wars, it wasn't used as evidence against those at the Nuremberg trials. But it was absolutely fascinating. Alan, thank you. This was brilliant. Anyway, that's it from me. I've harped on for too long. I don't know what I'm going to read next week, because I've actually, apart from the short stories, I've finished the books, all of the books that I was reading. But I'm quite pleased to have ticked off Occult Detective October, something for Victober, and something for Historathon Q4, all in the first week. I hope you're having a lovely start to October, and thank you for popping by. It's always lovely to see you. I shall speak to you soon. Bye for now.